Welcome to the StoryPowers Podcast, a show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Travis Lachner. Travis is a former college athlete turned entrepreneur with one successful exit and one failed company. Now he's an elite creative director and multimedia producer, helping others unleash their creative energy. Travis is also a much braver man than I am because he rocks one of the most solid mustaches I've seen all year round, and he actually likes improv comedy. As you hear, he's not your average Joe or your average Travis. I mean, English is a confusing language to me sometimes. If you like the show, please subscribe and leave us an iTunes review. We both know you always wanted to do a little more charity, so why not start with me? Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Lachner. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here, Francisco.
As the 7 people who listen to this podcast know, I like to do some research on my guests, which is why I was absolutely delighted that you decided to remove almost all of your background info from social media about a week before we recorded this. And I had to go searching through the web about you. And we all know that that's not a good place to be.
Oh, no. What'd you find out there?
Well, so one of the questions I had was, you have not only the mustache, but you have a completely shaved head, which, it's a brave style choice. But then I found some pictures of you with long hair online, and the shaved head made complete sense to me.
The MySpace days were an interesting era. I'll just leave it at that.
The first thing I wanted to understand is, because your story is kind of a strange one, right? So, you are, as some people call it, a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. So we met through social media because you started talking about storytelling. And as I said to you, any talk of storytelling, social media is like blood on the water to a shark for me. But then, I started trying to find out more about you. And there's all these pieces that don't seem to match together. So there's, college hockey star, journalism and cannabis consultant and marketing stuff. So just talk me through how did one thing lead into the other?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have a very non-traditional journey or story. And I think that's a big helpful piece for a lot of people out there that feel like you have to have this lane carved out for you, like since you're a child through high school and through college, you know what you're going to do. And then your career path is building into that. I have had pretty much four different experiences, completely different industries that have all combined into a single story and a single mission. So a lot of what's really happened over the years is just being really mindful of the moment, of the situation, and just being very adaptable. All of this started, as you mentioned earlier, in the hockey world. That was all I knew growing up, was hockey. I started putting on my first pair of skates at age 4 and finally took them off at age 24. So that was my life, my dreams. That was everything, all through middle school, all through high school. It was practice during the weekdays, games on the weekend. Any place I traveled was for hockey. So for a long time, that was all I knew. That was what I thought I was going to do with my life. And around college, my senior year, it got cut short with a shoulder injury and wasn't able to pursue that anymore. And really that started this pivot point of understanding there isn't one route or one path. So after I started kind of realizing the hockey dream was really not going to be happening anymore, it's okay. I had a backup plan. I was going to be a EDM DJ and producer. I started making music back in the MySpace days, as we alluded to earlier, just on the side as kind of a hobby and a hustle. And I was really passionate about that too. But again, started to realize it was a very unrealistic goal. I put in all the hours, put in the effort, did all the schmoozing. I lived in downtown Denver, but realized it was just not a feasible solution either. And I had reached this point in my life, culmination of just every shitty moment that you could imagine hitting all at once. So hockey was no longer a piece of my life, and that was my primary identity. So I had a little bit of this internal crisis of, okay, who am I? Then I thought it was going to be music, and realized that wasn't really going to happen unless you are willing to sell your soul and it's really not in it for, you're really enough to give up the passion and the heart that was there for it. So extracted from that and a personal relationship that I was in for a long time. I was convinced I was getting married, having a kid, starting a family. And I was like, all right, there it is. This is what I'm doing. Like, it wasn't hockey. It wasn't music. It was this. I'm going to be a family man. And less than 3 months later, none of that was happening. So I was at this point of, I guess, middle-class white boys version of rock bottom. I realized there are people with much more difficult situations, but as far as internal struggle and kind of finding myself, what am I here for? What am I doing? I was just lost. And I had discovered the School of Greatness podcast from Lewis Howes. And it really shifted my mindset and the trajectory of my life. That was where I discovered business and branding and entrepreneurship, and just went all in, and discovered my very first company that I built was actually like a community and a brand and a personality that you could attract people to. So that was a big piece of the puzzle, was discovering entrepreneurship and branding as a mission and as a vision. So crafted my first company, which was in the cannabis space. So was here in Colorado. So right during that wave of the first legalization, that green rush.
You had a pretty cool name, didn't it?
Yes. The first company I started was Be High. And that was with with 2 E's. The whole concept of it was a portion of every purchase was donated to support honeybees. That was a big crisis.
I didn't know that. I thought it was just a play on, Be High, Be High.
It's a little bit of both. But what I really discovered was the power of branding. What really I saw in the cannabis space was every brand or every smoke shop, any dispensary, like it was all on this like very stereotypical, like Rasta, stoner man, Cheech and Chong, Bob Marley, like poster type of vibe. And there was a lot of people that I knew in my life, doctors and lawyers and my parents' friends, like that consumed cannabis and were not like in that vibe or like that, didn't fit that at all. So I went the polar opposite direction with this brand and made a brand for responsible, respectable cannabis consumers. So people that were a lot more, I guess, low key about it, higher functioning, more productive people. And that was where I discovered, like, you can build a brand with a personality or a story, and it attracts people of that similar personality. So that was a big piece of the puzzle to really shift things in my head for brand building and business. And I'm super grateful. I grew that community and eventually sold that company. That was that first acquisition I ever had. Was still fairly young, but it was exciting. It was fun. It was the fuel I needed to like get things going again and get things back on track. So that was the what kicked me off into the business world and entrepreneurial world. After the exit, became an advisor and a consultant for the company. So that cracked open zooming out and helping somebody from more of like an advisor or consultant level, which led to the agency world, started doing that for other clients, and have been doing that the last 3 or 4 years in the agency context, just expanding, building the army, and really diversifying that whole, what I can bring to the table has been such a wide range that this context helps me kind of zero in on what I can actually do for other people and do for other brands rather than for myself. That was a lot of where my focus was. So that's been my primary focus for a while, and now in the early stages of kind of firing up my next media adventure. So keeping busy, but continuously pivoting.
Let me understand something, because
Yeah.
you explained that you developed a personality or a story for the cannabis company. Now, a lot of people that are into branding will know exactly what you mean by that. And for people that are not into that world, I think the obvious question is, what does that mean exactly? So, okay, so you want this, I'm not just saying hipster, but you want the high middle class professional that is serious, that is not a stoner. Okay, fine, you get that personality, that, and I think avatar, some people call it, that customer idea. What do you do with that? How does that translate into real life?
So what I've discovered in the context of storytelling is the most critical piece is when someone can envision themselves in that story. So I think the big mistake I had a lot of the time in storytelling was just making about me, where I came from, what I want to do, my mission, etc. And that's like the amateur version of storytelling. But true deep storytelling is when a consumer or anybody in that realm that's wants to approach that understands they can basically replace themselves in that story. And I think that was the biggest piece I started to discover with email marketing and email messaging, was I was just doing very light storytelling, I guess, without even realizing it, of sharing previous experiences of my friends' parents kicking me out of their house because they thought I was some stoner and a bad influence. And coincidentally, I hadn't even smoked in my entire life at that point. And their son actually had and did. So it was like having those moments where where people resonated. They were like, oh, I had a moment like that too, because I had long hair in high school. Everybody thought I was a stoner and other people resonated with it. So to me, it was about creating micro moments that people could insert themselves into or see little pieces of themselves. And that was what I discovered was the most useful piece of that whole storytelling element. And this was before I was even intentionally developing marketing and storytelling, but I realized that was what resonated with people, is when they responded and be like, yeah, me too. And it was the exact same over and over, though that would always be a positive signal of somebody kind of coming into the community. They would resonate with one of the stories, one of the emails, one of the articles, and then they were on board for the journey. So that was the biggest piece I've kind of saw, was setting up that structure to let somebody insert themselves into your story.
It's interesting that you say, because you said two things that are to some extent contradictory. Yeah. So one, you said that we are not the heroes of the story. And this, I think the way people in the storytelling community, I don't know if you call it community, but in the storytelling world, people refer to this as, in the hero's journey, you are not a hero, the customer is the hero, the company is the guide. So, we are Yoda, we're not Luke Skywalker. And that's very clear. I think any good marketing nowadays will have the customer has a problem, and then the company or the product or you comes in and helps them out of that predicament. So you're not the hero, you're the guide. But at the same time, as you described with your email campaigns, you can be the hero, if we want to call it that. You're the main character, but you just need to be relatable enough that people will see themselves in that story. Because if you, and again, you've seen some of my stuff. Most of my stories, I'm in them, but I'm trying to, it's always a story, well, it's almost always a story of failure or something embarrassing, but I always need to make it relatable enough so other people can see themselves in it. If I want to talk about public speaking, it can't be a story about how I'm in front of these hundreds of people and it's amazing and I'm really enjoying it. People won't probably relate to that at all. But if I say, I was feeling nervous, my hands were sweating, and what if I bombed? People will relate to that. So you can be the character, but you can't be, you have to be the underdog. You can't be an overachiever, because, only only wankers relate to those stories.
Well, no, I mean, it's true. And it took me a while to realize that, especially with the personal branding and professional branding, you kind of have this misperception that it needs to be perfect and you need to be this dude in a suit and tie and have your course like ready right out the gate, like this weird perception. But what I realized leading back to the story that changed my life, Lewis House, why did that resonate with me? It was because I saw myself in his story. He explains it with his one-liner of, I was playing pro football and then I broke my arm and I was living on my sister's couch. He's got his story down pat. But every single time he goes through it, I just envision myself like, oh my God, that was like the same moment of when I was going through that and I couldn't play hockey anymore. Oh, and that was the moment like this. And you just start building that visual adventure kind of in your mind. And that's where the power of storytelling is when you are just beyond activating like the text and the words, like in somebody's mind, you're creating that entire world and emotions and context and backstories, and all of those pieces coming together is what makes a powerful story. So that relatability is a huge piece that I think is often neglected because people want to kind of sensationalize the story, and it often has the opposite effect in the long run.
And I take it that your understanding of those concepts came, let me backtrack. I know because I've heard you say this. I don't remember if it was on the show, on the Bisnode, or if I read something you put out online. But I know that for a while you hid the fact that you had a failed company. All right. So do you want to talk about when that shift happened?
Yeah, that was actually fairly recently this year. So after my cannabis company, I had a successful exit. I was in kind of a transitionary role, was in an okay financial spot. So I kind of went to the opposite side of the spectrum. I thought I was balling, thought I was going to just fire up another company. Let's do this again. Didn't realize like how grateful and I guess maybe not rare, but realizing that having a successful company your first run isn't quite typically how it goes. It's typically like a 1 out of 10 type of thing. So I was still
with marriages is the same thing. I would know.
So yeah, that was the kind of the approach I was in starting my second company, and just had the completely wrong focus. So what I was trying to build was a blockchain and cryptocurrency education platform. I was very passionate, again, how I was passionate about the social side of cannabis, kind of breaking that stigma. I had a similar mission in cannabis. There was kind of this misperception, like, Bitcoin's just for drug dealers and like hitmen and like weird.
I wish it was just for drug dealers and hitmen because they would get off my bloody LinkedIn direct messages.
So
that from the law and from my feed and my connections.
Exactly.
Jesus.
So this was, I guess, a few years ago before all those guys started coming out of the woodworks. But I essentially, I just was way too overconfident. Spent a ton on video gear and video production and software, bought the whole year's worth of software instead of like just the monthly amounts, like thinking just lots of rookie mistakes due to overconfidence and assuming that this was going to be as successful as the previous venture. But where I missed the mark was on the messaging and the market fit. So what I wanted to do was share how blockchain and the underlying technology reshapes our culture and economics and our political structure, and like the deeper like philosophical, like this is going to change the world. And what I realized is people don't give a shit about that at all. So what should have been done was giving a more clear value-based messaging, a value-based product. We had already put together the course, everything 100% before we even put it to market. So didn't have that feedback loop going, and really just, missed the mark. And I was super embarrassed about it for a while. Like a lot of people I announced it to everybody, had like the formal launch plan and promo, did everything right on paper, but wasn't in tune with that market and that audience. So I had the option to kind of go the other route of like, be a Bitcoin billionaire if you invest, like that whole annoying thing. But as you know, and everybody else knows, like that's really just it just rubs you the wrong way. That messaging is so very like Tai Lopez style internet marketing. Like, I don't know. It's just not my vibe. So ultimately realized it was not going to be a profitable venture. Had to shut down the doors, still left all the videos and all the education up, put it up for free so that it's out there, I guess, for the world to have. But as far as a successful company, it most certainly was not. And once we saw that and kind of shut down the gates, I was super embarrassed. I took it down off my LinkedIn. I stopped making references to it on public posts. And it was just like, yeah, super weird moment. But these last couple months in LinkedIn and this whole community that I've been tapping into, I'm discovering the more authentic I've been. I mean, I've heard it 100 times from other podcasts and everybody else in the space about the reinforcement of authenticity, but it was just so damn true. And it took me far longer than it should have to realize and kind of lean into that authenticity, but that's a big piece of my story. So I put it back up and I addressed the lessons I learned from it, have shifted. I still use all the skills I learned from there, video production, the video software, all the gear. So it wasn't all for naught, but it really did take me a while to reshape that perspective of understanding you don't have to have this perfectly polished resume out there online and looking. If you do have those blemishes or those imperfections, that's what people resonate with. And again, we're right back to relatability. So being authentic with your story is always going to be more valuable than trying to create that fake it till you make it perception of everything's perfect and shiny from the outside, because it's never like that.
Something you said, I was just thinking about something you said right at the beginning that connects a bit to the reason perhaps that your second company didn't work. Because you're saying that, your identity was tied to being a hockey player, and then your identity was tied to being on MySpace. And for what I understand, you were a very good hockey player. I think your brother is still trying to chase your records, or was until not that long ago. And I think I've heard you say before that you were MySpace famous, for whatever that's worth. And then you had the relationship. And what strikes me from those cases is that your identity in those situations was always tied to an external thing. It's not Travis who is a good person who cares about their friends, or it was always hockey or MySpace or DJing or whatever that was, or the relationship. So it was always an external thing. Then you do the cannabis thing, and you were clearly addressing something internal or intrinsic. It's a feeling, it's a type of person. But then when you went to the other thing, you were focused on all the societal benefits. But most people relate to a brand or a company because it's like me. It makes me feel something. And again, I'm passionate about some of those things, but I don't necessarily think I'm gonna buy into this whatever thing because this is gonna make society. I mean, if it feels to me like the type of company run by the type of person I am or would like to be, sure. But if their goal is something in the world they're trying to fix, but it's not touchy-feely, then I'm not sure how much I would relate to that. I just find that interesting, that how sometimes we very easily lose track of the difference between the external motivations and the external triggers and the internal ones. And with stories, the internal ones are the ones that matter. I mean, what are your stories about? No one cares.
Exactly.
What are the feelings? What are the experiences? So you said, your white boys version of rock bottom. And it is true that feels, particularly, in the moment in time we're living in, it feels kind of crazy to suggest that we had struggles in life. But how you felt when that was going on is what people relate to. Maybe our white boy struggles are not serious by any stretch of the imagination, but feeling defeated and feeling lost are things I think most people can relate to. If the reason we're feeling lost is because no one is engaging with my posts on LinkedIn, maybe we should not emphasize that part of the message, but it's still a story about feeling lost. So
No, that's 100% it. That seeing yourself in that story is such a critical piece. And when you zoom out too far, like I did with the power of blockchain, and it's going to change the world, and it's going to change our economic system, and all of that is much, much, much more difficult to resonate with people on a personal level. You start to get more of like an academic crowd that kind of has that higher level thinking, but for a brand and a company and a story that people want to connect with, yeah, definitely missed the mark. Way too much technical jargon, philosophy, economics, when in reality, yeah, it should be a story about an immigrant from Guatemala who used to have to send remissions back to his family, but 60% of it was cut from bank fees, and then from Western Union, and then from MoneyGram. Then sharing that story, how you could send the same money with Bitcoin and 100% of it goes to the family. Like, that would have been a better route to go.
pretty good story, that.
Exactly. In hindsight, learned plenty during all of that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you lose touch of that relatability and the character of the story, it doesn't matter how important your mission is. If people can't connect and see where their space in that mission is, it's all for naught. It's not going to go anywhere.
Let's go from the saving society and the Guatemalan immigrant to something that some people think it's perhaps a little less aspirational: email marketing. You mentioned it before. I know it's something you understand. And up until not that long ago, I had this, which I believe is a misguided understanding, that email marketing doesn't really work. I mean, no one really responds to these things. It's annoying, spam, whatever, right? But I'm wrong. I know that I'm wrong. So just tell me we know what doesn't work is the emails that we ignore all day long. But what does work with email marketing, and how branding and storytelling fit into that?
So yeah, I guess there's two pieces of the puzzle here. As far as in the email world, there's reaching out, just cold email with the sole goal of just getting a response and whatever. There's a whole strategy for that. But for what you're referencing is an internal audience, somebody that's been welcomed into your circle, subscribed or joined in whatever capacity. They want to go on a journey. That's what I kind of think of it as think of your mailing automation sequence or workflow as an adventure, a digital experience of some sorts. You're obviously, again, a piece of that puzzle, but you're not the main character. You're the
guy.
Yoda example, I guess, is too perfect it's going to be a saturated example in storytelling.
It's Gandalf, Yoda, or Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
Mr. Miyagi is great, but some people, you're at borderline, I think, from getting the Mr. Miyagi example. I think I'm
getting there. But that was the piece I've discovered is what marketing and branding really is becoming, is developing experiences, whether that's via events, via websites, via your apps, or an email chain can be a storytelling adventure when executed properly. So the critical pieces that I see would be invoking curiosity. That's one of the easiest ways to at least get people going kind of on that adventure. And then some type of expectation for each email, whether it's going to be a visual expectation, an image from your story, a call to action based expectation. Each email is going to move you one step forward to build your personal brand, or whatever the journey or workflow is. But have a clear goal or mission or lane for each of those sequences. That's where it's going to be much more powerful versus again, going too broad or zooming out too far. A lot of people do that, and it loses touch. You lose that human element, that personality that people want. So don't be afraid to inject your personality into emails, but remember to make sure that the consumer is on a clear journey, and don't lose focus of where that finish line is, and create different lanes for each of those consumers. That's a huge piece in when you start getting into a system called multi-asset marketing, is basically identifying these archetypes or personas and understanding which lane of emails are going to fit best for them. So lots of room for personalization, and inject your personality in whatever creative ways you can, whether it's through photos, through stories, through video snippets. People just love having those tiny micro moments of relatability that just start adding up until eventually they feel like they know you. There's so many people and podcasters and anchors and whatever, like, that people feel like they just know them and they've never met them in their entire life, but they know some like details about their kids and little personality pieces and stuff like that. So that's where the power of it really comes in, is when those details start to add up.
Yeah, this is a problem I don't think I'm ever going to have. An inability to inject my own personality or share personal details has never been something I've been accused of.
Yeah, I've been on the opposite end of the spectrum, so we'll meet in the middle.
And this is something I'm also, again, I don't really have an understanding of it other than my feeling for it. But for example, there are two, I get emails from a few people that are in the storytelling world. So one of them is Kendra Hall, who is probably the top keynote speaker on storytelling for the last few years. And the other one is Donald Miller, who's very well known for having written a book called Building a Story Brand. And he's the one that got the whole codified hero's journey as a marketing approach. I don't think he invented it, but he definitely made it popular in the last few years. And Kendra is, she sends an email every week, I think, and usually it's one of the videos that maybe she shared on social media, maybe she didn't. But up until, I think, the third or fourth email, there was no mention that, by the way, I have a book. And I think only, maybe 8 emails in or 10 emails in, now she has some sort of course and she's mentioned it and whatever. Donald Miller, on the other hand, I think he'll send you 3 emails with tips on how to make your website better. And the 4th email is a sale, right? Or as a sales pitch. And every other email is a sales pitch, I think. And after a point, it's just like, okay, fine. And I don't know if there is any type of wisdom around when using email marketing. Is there, a formula for this type of thing? Or is just, try whatever you want and some stuff will work and some stuff won't?
There's no direct formula, of course. There's obviously best practices, general trends. But again, this is going to start just reverse engineering from that consumer. If you're laser specific on who you're helping, who you're serving, that storytelling becomes so much easier. Those pain points you want to hit are always going to be top of mind, because it's not something, it is something they're struggling with, and it's on a more relatable level. So that's typically the formula I put together, which is kind of always shifting and has room for flexibility, is everything starts with focusing on who you serve. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. Once you focus on who you serve, you need to clarify the pain point or the problem that you solve. And once it's clear what you can do for them, you explain how with a story, or why, one or the other, or both. That's really the formula I kind of try and piece together, is recognize the audience, recognize the clear pain point, and then offer the solution in the context of a story. So that's what's worked best for me, and far as email marketing, blogs, anything kind of text-based, because you don't have a whole lot of like bonus like with all the other multimedia, you can have audio and video to your advantage. You just really have to clarify the story so they see themselves in it, and then they're like, oh, okay, so all I need is to buy X and then I'll be at Y. And that's really the formula I'm trying to create in email or any text-based story, is a very obvious, clear pain point that disappears. And that's typically what resonates best. And depending on the audience, that is going to change, obviously, what that pain point is and how it's resolved. But that's probably the best, closest thing to a formula I have on my end.
Yeah, that's the problem with formulas, is that some people don't get that a formula is more, it's a guiding structure or framework. It's not something set in stone, because you need flexibility, and some stories will give themselves to being told in a certain way and some not. I've gone on LinkedIn and said, oh, this is, a story made simple, and I gave 3 basic sections of a story. I said, you need a setup, then something changes, and then you need consequences of that change. And then someone attacked me on, oh no, you need plot twists. I was like, yeah, if you're writing a novel, sure. Yeah, it was like, I'm writing a crime novel and it needs plot twists and you need to develop the characters. It's like, sure. But I can also talk about how, my daughter was going crazy in the shower because she had no toys. And then I pointed that she could use the shampoo bottles as, pretend that they were people or cars or whatever. She thought it was an amazing thing. And then from that, I took the moral that, we forget that it's our imagination that is the most relevant thing, and we just need permission to play whatever. That is a story, right? It's not a great story, but it's a decent enough story, and we get my point across. But then people go, oh yes, but then this other story doesn't fit that method. But no, of course not. It's just, you're trying to just give people something easy so they can get started. And then they'll go, well, actually, beginning, middle, and end. What if I put the end right at the beginning and then work my way around, as plenty of TV shows do? The what they call in media res, like Breaking Bad. It doesn't start at the end, but starts with Walter half naked in the desert holding a gun and the police is coming, right? Yep. That's the middle. That's not the beginning. But you need to understand the form to, muck around with the form. And talking about mucking around, I wanted to touch on something before we're done, which is a completely different form of storytelling, if we want to call it that I have very little understanding of, which is improv.
Oh, man.
Which is one of my, I would say it's a fear. I'm not afraid of it. I just hate it. I hate it. I've done a bit, and it's just,
Oh, man. Yeah, I was 100% on your team several years ago. I am the absolute most intense introvert you could imagine. Like, I do not desire social situations, bars. The only time I like going out to like things like that is if like a sick artist is playing and I'm there for the music. I'm not there to socialize or drink or anything like that. So this improv world was 100% new to me. So I'll set the context there of this isn't like one of the things that I was like, oh, I want to be a hockey player. Oh, I want to produce music. Like, this was definitely a forced, kind of pushed in the pool type of situation. Thanks to podcasts again. When I was in downtown Denver, living my the downtown hustle struggle, trying to afford the increasing rent every year. Big piece of personal development that I kept hearing over and over in podcasts was finding a way to embrace public speaking, or whether it's on stage or at events or on podcasts, more like this, that it was one of the most valuable skills people learned. And in Lewis Howe's context, he had done like Toastmasters. And I had heard from other people like, oh, that's like a similar situation, similar goal, but very like much more formal. Like, they teach you to like how to toast, pretty much how to write speeches, how to speak at conferences, etc. And it was like a bit too much, like too formal. But I had a moment listening to a podcast where I was just crippled with social anxiety, wasn't going out, wasn't really developing any personal or professional relationships, and was listening to a podcast where a guy was telling a story, very relatable story, and the exact same thing. He was like, I was living downtown New York for so long. I didn't have any friends, wasn't interacting. And he mentioned And then I signed up for improv. And as he was like mentioning that, I was walking home from work and I was walking under the Voodoo Improv Theater. And it was just one of those moments in life where it was just too much of a coincidence to pass it up. And it was like, I think the second or third time I had heard about improv. So signed up for those classes the moment I went home, and I assumed I was just going to bail on it. I mean, I thought it was going to be like, maybe I'll go the first couple sessions. And like you, I was going to be like, just super turned off by it. And I certainly was the first couple times. Like, it's forced social interaction. And at the beginning, I hated it. I am 100% with you. I hated it. It was everything I did not desire in social situations, forced. And after a while, what really flipped the switch for me was having a good teacher. So the teachers kind of changed each course. So assumed I was just going to go and quit, but actually made it through the first 8 weeks, graduated, went to the next level, did it again, next level, did it again, next level. And what really finally connected the dots for me was the concept of forced mindfulness. When you are on stage, an improv stage, you have no choice but to be truly, truly in that moment. You can't be thinking about stuff that happened earlier in the day. You can't be thinking about planning a witty one-liner or some shit like that. It's always going to fail. You just have to bring yourself to the moment, and you have no option but to get in the zone. A lot of people call it the flow state. There's lots of like psychology behind it, but I hadn't been to that space in a while since I had played hockey or was producing music. Those are the only instances I had discovered that. But improv was a push into the pool that really showed me the power of mindfulness. So there's this kind of meta philosophical thing going on with improv that really attracted me to it. Of, in a way, improv is our life. We have one scene that we can live our life from start to finish. And at the end of the day, nobody really gives a shit what happens. So it's on you to enjoy the hell out of that moment. So that was the biggest piece I discovered from improv. And then I guess the actual storytelling element within it is a whole nother journey, because like you mentioned, there's so many people that want to write the story and add plot twists and add one-liners, but the absolute best improv stories and scenes are ones that just, you couldn't write them. You couldn't hire the best writers in the world to write a scene like this. So just being in the moment and creating that structure for a story to unfold was really a lot more powerful than the first couple weeks or months I was in there. You think of like stand-up comedy, you kind of compare it to that, like, oh, I'm going to think of something hilarious and jump in and say it. And then that's like totally, totally not how improv works at all. It's about being present, listening, and just bringing yourself into that moment and continuously evolving. And eventually it develops a story. And sometimes it's awful. That's the kind of the brilliance of improv, I think, is it creates a moment that couldn't be written otherwise. And sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's middle of the road, but that's kind of the beauty of it, is regardless of if it tanks or if it was super successful, it's the exact same structure, the exact same moment over and over, and then it disappears. That's the beauty of it, is once an improv scene is gone, that story disappears. It lives in a few people's minds forever, but it's not written, it's not recorded, it's not filmed. It's just a moment in life that 10, 20, 50 people in a room shared and then disappears. And to me, there's just something brilliant about that experience and that unexpectedness that you just couldn't write, even if you hired the best writers in the world. So I think it's all about structure. Similar to how we were trying to get into email formulas, improv is about setting up the lanes for a story to unfold. And a lot of the time it's more about listening than talking. So that might be the lesson for extrapolating it into the business world, is focus and invest more time on listening than on writing or developing the story, and see how that works out.
I think it's I think beautiful is the word that comes to mind. This idea of the shared experience that is not captured, which is something that is very rare nowadays in our world. And this is a big, it's not a fight, but it's a continuous argument I have with my friends or my wife, where it's this constant urge to have to record everything. You know, as soon as something looks like it might be interesting, then a phone is out and someone is trying to record it. And I think I'm going to continue with something that is becoming a bit of a tradition, which is guests of mine give me something wonderful, and that should be the moment to end. And then I feel the need to add some of my usual nonsense. And it's that I don't like improv, even though I have competed on the Toastmasters version of improv, which is improvised speeches when they just give you a topic and you have to run with it. I've competed, I've won stuff nationally and stuff. But there's this game I played the other day, which I guess takes a tiny bit of improv, and it's a sort of after dinner game, and it was sex with me is like, and then people from the group will just shout stuff at you, two things, and you need to incorporate those things and reply. So I played this for the first time in a Christmas party, and then someone said sex with me is like, and someone shouted chicken, and the other one said burrito, and then I thought about that for about 10 seconds and said, sex with me is like a chicken burrito. It looks good from the outside. As you're going through it, you think, I thought I would enjoy this more. And the next day, you definitely regret it.
Nailed it. But see, you couldn't write that without those anchor points and those moments.
It's true.
Sit in your room for weeks. I mean, maybe you could, but it's just, oh no, that's brilliant. Well played.
I think it also might be, and this is very true with me. I don't need a psychiatrist to tell me that. One of the reasons I have a problem with improv, and I think a lot of people would have a problem with improv, is because I don't feel I'm that good at it. And it's one of the reasons why I much prefer the chance to rehearse and practice any of public speaking than to just do it off the cuff. I know I'm not as good off the cuff as I am when I had time to think about structure and what I'm going to say and which story I'm going to tell. But I guess that's true for everything in life. If you're good at it, you just tend to enjoy it more. If a lot of the fear, I guess, comes from embarrassing yourself from not being good at all.
I think a big piece of it is group dynamics as well. That whole concept of, I guess, being good at improv is largely due, I think, to the group dynamics. Even the world's, I guess, objectively most skilled, best improver with the wrong group of people can really go a different direction. So there might be a piece of the puzzle in there. I mean, not that I'm an advocate for you jumping back in there. I haven't hopped back in a while, but of trying it with a different group of people, the energy might be way different. I noticed that throughout my experience of, at the beginning, it was just absolutely awful regardless of who I was with. And by the end, it became more of like a selective thing, like similar to in hockey.
I think you just described my romantic life.
Yeah.
It was always awful at the beginning. After, I mean, it depends who you with. I mean,
well, it's learning your own vibes, who you work well with, who you don't work well with. But that's kind of what I equate it to, because just everything in my life has had some type of collaborative piece. Whether you're a hockey player, you vibe with somebody that's on your line. Like, that's a really good moment to zero in on. As a producer, when you have a pop star or a vocalist that is just like on the same frequency as you, it just, everything starts to click. It works better. So that's kind of the equation I start to see with improv teams, is a certain amount of it is just creating dynamic energy of 2 or 3 people that are just electric together, regardless of what they're doing. But yeah, that social element is definitely a huge piece of it that I was not enjoying jumping on stage in front of a bunch of people. Like I worked in Denver and like knew a decent amount of people. So that was always in the back of my head, like, oh God, like are people that I know here? So it definitely takes a while to get past that whole pure anxiety, but a lot of it's desensitizing yourself to it. So it created a new, not a different person, but it allowed me to step into a more confident version of myself. So I'm grateful for it. But I've certainly,
You've done your time.
Yeah, I've paid my dues. I could probably survive on stage if I had to, but yeah, I'm not like going out of my way for it. So that was one of those kind of double dip. It was personal and professional development, but it ended up being, I gained a lot of friends, lots of that higher level thinking, that social philosophy has been really helpful to carry with me through life. So super grateful for it, but completely understand your side of it. Don't worry.
On that note, this is a question that's not really easy to answer. I'm not sure how easy it is to answer for you now. Where can people find you?
I am currently only on LinkedIn. I've kind of gone all in on LinkedIn this year, typically not the social media content poster, Gary V style type of dude, but I realize and recognize the value of it. The mission I'm on right now is definitely heavily focused on the LinkedIn community. So that's what I am currently focusing on right now is LinkedIn world, and more than happy to connect with anybody and everybody there. And yeah,
I guess that by the time this comes out, which will be in a few weeks, maybe there'll be some action on bistnode.com as well, right?
There definitely will be. I've had my COVID clarity, as I call it, over the last couple months. Once the client side of things had the chance to pause, I really kind of came into what exactly I'm going to be doing these next few years. I've been putting it off for a long time, but I've really found my calling in serving artists and athletes and executives that really have a blockage of creative energy. So I'm on the mission to unleash the world's creative energy. Check out thebeastnode.com. We have a lot of meaningful media coming into production. So podcasts, web shows, video shows, all designed for personal and professional development for content creators, any aspiring influencers. So that's been a really fun project I'm bringing to life as we speak, literally as we speak, as you've kind of seen things on LinkedIn over the weeks. So staying adaptable, staying flexible, but more than happy to have anybody and everybody along for the journey.
Perfect. Travis, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck getting the new project off the ground. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you around LinkedIn as we do.
Most definitely. Thank you, Francisco.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. And until next time.